Has a generation of work towards equality for women been all but undone by a year of COVID chaos? On International Women's Day, we talked to the UN's second in command, Amina Mohammed, about the impact of COVID on the world's women and what can be done to help. Plus the fight to get vaccines shared out and the efforts to build a fairer world after the injustice of the pandemic. This is Roundtable. Welcome to the programme. I'm David Foster. In its 75-year history, the United Nations has never faced a crisis like the coronavirus pandemic. So there's plenty to discuss with the UN's Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, and I'm pleased to say she joins us from New York for this special edition of Roundtable. We'll be chatting in just a moment, but on International Women's Day, a reminder of the chaos caused by COVID. COVID-19 has exacerbated inequalities globally. According to the United Nations, the pandemic could wipe out 25 years of progress towards gender equality in areas like employment, education, and mental and physical health. Before the pandemic, it was estimated that women were doing 3 times more unpaid work than men. It's now thought to be 6 times more. The United Nations predicts the crisis will have an impact lasting generations, with an estimated 47 million more women and girls in poverty. Amina Mohammed, very good to be able to talk to you on this International Women's Day. Why do you think during the course of the last 12 months, generations have seen their position in society set back so much because of this pandemic?
Thank you. Great to be with you, David. I think, first of all, let me first salute women's leadership, because without it, we wouldn't have made some of the inroads that we have been. And we've seen that it's proven once they're there, then things change, impact happens. But I think COVID, what it's done for us really in a setback is that, first of all, the shutdowns that have happened socioeconomically in the informal sector, the first to be hit, of course, have been women and young people. And that has been, a real impact in the homes, in the societies, in communities. And for that alone, I think, we have regressed in terms of the progress that we've made on the SDGs. More a slide in poverty, a slide back in access to basic services. As we've tried to deal with the health crisis, we've seen the competing demands for responding to COVID as against all other health services in very weak health systems. And so it has been a double burden. We've seen women in the workforce who are less anyway, but the first to have been impacted by this. And then again, the burdens of unpaid care in the home for the elderly, for children who've had to go online. And so in many, many cases, there really has been half of our society that's been impacted in ways that will be very difficult to recover if we don't have the responses that we need now.
Is this because in many sections of society around the world, women are still regarded, no matter what people say, still regarded as second-class citizens? They are easier to discard, easier to treat in a certain way than men.
Unfortunately, that is the case, but I think that we have seen change. The more that women are educated, the more that we are finding them in decision-making roles, the more that we are opening up the spaces for leadership, be it the parliament, be it cabinets, in the workforce. That is changing slowly. It is a mindset, it is behavioral change, it is cultural practice, and all of those have to be tackled at the same time as shoring up a enabling environment with the necessary laws that allow women to take their rightful place. At the end of the day, this really is about women's rights, it's people's rights, it's humans' rights, but it's about economic empowerment, opening up the space for women to take their place there, building the skills that are needed for that, and the basis to strengthen their positions in society.
But doesn't that just show that society's attitudes haven't really changed, despite all of the good words?
Oh, I think they have changed. I don't think they've changed sufficiently, but the glass is somewhat full. And I think what we need to do is to accelerate that and to make sure that we take the opportunities that are presented by COVID to reinforce that in the investments that we are making now. We're seeing in many stimulus packages on social protection, on education, on closing the digital divide, and really making sure that those investments happen to all of society, especially women that are left behind. So changes are being made. Women in leadership are helping that to happen. Where we've seen women leadership, we've seen more investments in health, we've seen more investments in education. So it's not all a bad story. It's a tough one, and I think we have to push harder, and we have to mobilize, particularly our young people. There's an intergenerational transition right now, and I think that this is the time that we can pull on their energy, their visions for a more equal world, and make this a reality for all.
I was reading a speech you gave not so very long ago, and you referenced Europe and Central Asia with particular regard to this pandemic. You say across the region, only 18% of these measures to alleviate difficulties in this time, target women's employment. What do you do about that?
I think first we need to put a spotlight on it. By having the figures here and knowing where the women are, you can begin to engage through the huge footprint that the UN has in convening those spaces in those countries to bring that to the notice of government, to bring it to the notice of parliaments, and to bring it to the notice of communities that somehow often don't know how bad this is. And I think that that's helpful. That's helpful to be able to begin the discussions, to begin to open up the spaces. And when we are negotiating many of the stimulus packages, to see that women's investments are made at this time, actually targeting where we see so few of
But
them
very
going at the
difficult,
current.
surely, to enforce laws, which many countries have, which do not allow discrimination.
Well, it is. I mean, that's why there's a reality and there's an aspiration. We work every day to try to close that gap. We have to work with parliamentarians. We have to work with women's groups. We have to work with the judiciary. We need to work with all partners. We need to encourage leaders when we convene them at the United Nations, and we are taking stock of the SDGs to put right on the front burner where some of these gaps are and what they need to do about it, and using the data and the evidence and the science that we have to prove to them that, in fact, what is happening here is a loss to their economy, a loss to their growth that should be inclusive, because half of the population is not involved, be it women, be it youth.
We will return to International Women's Day towards the end of this program, but I'd like to move now onto COVAX. That is the scheme, the international scheme to get vaccinations to the most vulnerable. Let's take a look at it. Vaccine distribution has become a key part of the conversation in the fight against the COVID-19 global pandemic. No one is safe until everyone is safe, goes the argument. And there is an economic cost of failing to vaccinate. One estimate suggests unequal vaccine distribution could lead to $1 trillion a year hit on the global economy. The COVAX initiative, led by the World Health Organization, was set up as part of a global effort to ensure equitable vaccine access for all. The first doses have recently been delivered, and the aim is to deliver more than 2 billion doses to people in 190 countries in less than a year. But right now, there's not enough money to make good on that promise. The WHO says another $2 billion is needed. As I was preparing for this program, I did a quick check, and I found only Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana on a list of those countries that have got the vaccines. Maybe you can add to that, or perhaps you can explain why it's so slow.
Well, yes, it's slow. And I think that here what we're seeing is a lot of vaccine nationalism. There are great efforts by some partners to try to put the doses into the COVAX for that to get out to developing countries. There is a gap, and everyone, particularly our frontline workers, should get this at the same time. But let me update the information. I mean, it is not only Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire now. We also have Nigeria that received 4 million doses this week. And we see another 18 countries that are coming online this week with COVAX. So COVAX is moving. It's slow. We need to increase production. We need to make sure that the doses that people need in the countries across the globe get them at the same time delivered and vaccinated. From the UN side, there is a huge operation to receive the vaccines and to deliver them, ensuring that everyone gets vaccinated as the doses are available. I think really the pressure right now is to make sure that COVAX gets its 2 billion doses and that we have the resources for that. And that the efforts that have been made by some regions, such as Africa, that those efforts to make sure that funding is available and that production is increased in order to get the vaccines where they're needed.
Okay, there are a few more countries that you've just mentioned than the Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana that I mentioned at the top of this section, but there are hundreds of countries that need these vaccinations. And you've got the head of the World Health Organization saying just a couple of days ago, it is our vision to start vaccinations in all countries within the first 100 days of the year. We're pretty much there now, he says. We only have 40 days left. Is that at all possible?
As Mandela often said, it always seems impossible until it's done. Our job is really to keep pushing for this and to making available the vaccines that need to be. We are looking at countries who have got excess orders for vaccines to try to bring them where there aren't any. But I think there are very real challenges, and all we can do is to continue to see what we can get to everyone in that first 100 days and to continue doing it through the year.
And what happens if you don't?
I don't know what happens if we don't. Many people will be at risk, first of all, at losing their lives, particularly the most vulnerable. But I think even more importantly, economies will not be able to open up as they should. Where there is COVID, it'll have its impact on everyone around the world. And so we'll continue to see a lot of suffering. That is absolutely unnecessary because there is the possibility to give everyone a vaccine that needs it today. And that's really what we should do. That's what leadership should be rising to the occasion in the world to do, is to make sure that there is a global response to everyone and leave no one behind.
And whose failure might that be if it comes to that? Would it be a failure on behalf of the World Health Organization, part of the United Nations, or a failure on behalf of those countries that said, yes, we're going to give you lots of money, but you're still $2 billion short?
It would be a failure of global leadership, quite frankly. This is when we need global leadership to come in solidarity with what has been a global pandemic. It is a health crisis, but it has also been a socioeconomic crisis for the very vulnerable and the very poor. There are the resources to do this. It needs political will. It needs global leadership. And if there is a failing, then it will be of global leadership.
And does that global leadership include the United Nations?
Well, the United Nations is made up of global leadership, so yes, absolutely. The membership of the United Nations is very much a part of that. But I think that there are wealthier countries that can do this and that have leaned forward. It's not to say that we haven't had, but we need them to dig deeper and to make sure that the response is equitable and that everyone gets a vaccine, particularly those on the front line and the most vulnerable.
Fair to say that you would be disappointed in the reaction you've had from international communities, particularly the wealthier nations who've said, yes, we're all for this scheme, but just haven't upped the money?
I think there'd be a great deal of disappointment. You only have to be out in these countries to see the suffering. Of course, we'd be disappointed. Where there is the wherewithal, then there is absolutely no excuse. And I think that, this is a global pandemic of which probably we will see more in the future. We have to learn the lessons of today, make sure that we are in a mode that can either prevent or are ready to contain the next one. But right now, I think that the global response for the vaccines has not been where it should be. We've probably seen the worst side of the behavior of some countries, and I hope that this will not happen as we go forward. It really is not where global solidarity should be with humanity today.
Who would you include? Which countries would you put on that list?
I think that if you just look to the countries that are right now leading on this. The ACT Accelerator and COVAX is led by a number of countries, and those countries, as much as we have seen some forward-leaning and some contribution to this, it's not enough. And I think that they know who they are, and I'd leave it at that.
Well, they know who they are, perhaps, but so do you. Why can't you say who they are?
I think it's better for us to be more constructive about calling on all countries to lift on this challenge and to really just ensure that we get the job done. As you said, the World Health Organization is moving together with the countries from the G20, from the G7, to make sure that we have the resources and that we have the vaccines that are necessary in the first 100 days. Let's see how far we can go.
You talk about the G7, the world's wealthiest countries, of which Canada is one. Are you surprised that Canada itself has put the nation Canada forward for the COVAX scheme, which is supposed to be for the most vulnerable nations in the world?
Well, I think Canada has expressed itself, and I think where we would like to see COVAX work is for the most vulnerable countries that need it more, with weaker health systems and with more vulnerability in their healthcare systems and their education systems.
Okay, I think I get the message from that, Amina. Thank you very much indeed. Just a final message to those countries that haven't done enough yet. What would you say?
They've got to do more. They will only be as safe as the investment that is made to ensure that everyone gets the vaccine and gets it as soon as possible.
But specifically what? Just pay up?
I think there are two things. I think they need to pay up because there will be a shortfall in the funding that is needed for it. But I also think that they need to work together with the pharmaceutical industry to make sure that the production is there for the numbers that we need to come to everyone at the same time.
Let's talk about sustainable development goals. That is getting a fairer world for millions of people by the end of this decade. This is what it's about. It's been more than 5 years since the United Nations adopted its Sustainable Development Goals. 17 key targets aimed at ending poverty, promoting peace, and protecting the planet by 2030. Goals like wiping out global hunger, providing clean water to all, and tackling climate change come with a huge price tag. $2 to $3 trillion per year, according to the United Nations. That was even before the pandemic, an unprecedented hit to the global economy that could take generations to recover from. How many years have the United Nations global goals been set back? Or is there opportunity in a crisis? Now, you have talked about education here, but in 2019, the International Rescue Group said failure to take action now means that the Sustainable Development Goals will not be met. What has changed in the intervening 18 months or 2 years to make them attainable?
Well, I think first of all, at the beginning of last year, we launched the Decade of Action for the Sustainable Development Goals, and we were clear country by country where many of the gaps were, including the financing that is needed for countries to achieve the goals. In the last 18 months, what we have seen is both the challenge of COVID, which has set back, as we had earlier spoken, be it jobs or the health systems, the education systems, but we've also seen the opportunity of stimulus packages that can be much more focused and honed in on the opportunity of closing the digital divide. Education went online for developed countries, but for developing countries, this happened in very rare circumstance, and it made it possible in the stimulus packages to try to finance infrastructure that would allow that to happen going forward. The same with health systems. We found a strengthening of the health systems with the response to COVID, and that it was at all levels. And here, stimulus packages again strengthening health systems. So that is an opportunity to try to get back on track. At the same time, we saw many lose their jobs. Social protection programs across Africa, for instance, were increased, where people were given employment, and that employment, in many cases, you saw informal and formal sector be moved on to digital platforms. Now, this is great for young people, and this also has helped us to leapfrog. It's insufficient, and so the decade of action that continues, this will be 9 years into it this year, we will continue to look for more support for the fiscal gaps in many of the stimulus packages, to continue to reinforce social protection programs, the green transition.
May we talk about one of the goals in particular? Because here we are in 2021, and it says, we hope, I'm sure it is hope, to end all forms of malnutrition, including achieving by 2025 the internationally agreed targets of stunting and wasting in children under 5 years of age. That is within 4 years.
Well, I mean, there has been some progress on that. I think one of the things that we're doing right now this year is this whole process from the country level up to take stock of what we need to do in food systems, to pay attention to nutrition, to pay attention to the way we consume food, and make it more valuable to the youngest, to the most vulnerable, to a new way of addressing the food systems. That food system summit will take place this year. What we are seeing is that because the process itself is bringing from country level up some of the challenges that we would need to address, we can be hopeful that that can inform policy making, that can inform the investments that need to be made to make those transitions much more durable. And as you said, how do we make sure that nutrition itself, especially for stunting and children, is addressed? Now, it can through the school systems, through the full value chain for agriculture, ensuring that at the level of the communities that we are making the investments that are needed in education and in health.
If we could just talk a little bit about, you mentioned vaccine nationalism. I want to talk about nationalism and jingoism in general when it comes to this particular pandemic, because across the last 12 months, a lot has been made of the very best of human nature, helping one another out. But are we not seeing the very worst of it to some extent, with countries that retreat behind their own borders, treat their less well off pretty badly? And perhaps it's not a surprise that this is happening in a time when people have very little and they have so many worries on a national level.
I think the stresses and strains of the world are apparent, and leadership is key to this. And that's why I spoke at the beginning to women's leadership, where you've got women's leadership with much more inclusive, opening up spaces for everyone to participate in the economy, in decision making, and making sure investments get to the right space. Now, when it comes to global solidarity, you're absolutely right. We haven't seen the responses that we should have seen. And there is enough, as we would say, to go around, certainly to invest in many of the fiscal deficits that we see in countries that are vulnerable, huge inequalities, high levels of poverty, in some cases the climate crisis exacerbating a lot of the humanitarian work that we are doing. So yes, it's not being the solidarity that we've expected. And
Okay.
I think we continue
You're
to push for that. The Secretary General continues to have a call for it. It is very disappointing, yeah.
Amina, you are from Nigeria. You have children. On this International Women's Day, does it make you sad or hopeful that we have to talk about hundreds of young girls being released in your home country last week, that they are still being kidnapped, that they are still being used for extortion? Okay, they are safe now, but what about a society, a world that allows that?
Well, I'm not sure it's the society that allows that. I think it's weak systems of governance and security that allows that. There is always criminality in any society, and there are checks and balances, institutions, and responses that are required to keep people safe, particularly children and girls in school. This is not the first time that it's happened in my country, and I sincerely hope it will be the last time. But I would just call on government, call on those that are in leadership to try to strengthen the security system, reform it such that we find that from the community level up, we are protected. Our girls are protected. Our schools are protected. Our communities and societies are protected. In the case of Nigeria, there are criminal elements, but we're also find that we have insurgency, and so the government itself has a number of security constraints to deal with. But at the same time, the first, remit of a leadership in any country is the security of their citizens. And here, the UN continues to support reform in the security systems and to make sure that they're strengthened to protect citizens.
Amina Mohammed, it's been very interesting talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us on this special edition of Roundtable. Thank you. And indeed, from me, David Foster, wherever you happen to be watching this edition of Roundtable, we thank you very much for your company. From the entire team, until next time, goodbye.